Do you know what it's like to have your own father look you in the eye and tell you that you're dead to him? Not in some dramatic movie scene, not in some exaggerated story someone tells to get attention. I'm talking about literally being in the hallway of the house where you grew up, the house where your mother sang you to sleep, the house where you learned to walk, where you had your first meal, where you laughed for the first time. And your father, the man who raised you, the man who carried you on his shoulders when you were 5 years old, that same man looks at you with a coldness you've never seen before and says, "You're no longer my son." This happened to me. My name is Karim. I am 27 years old. I was born and raised in Amman, Jordan. And this is the story of how I lost everything I knew: my family, my friends, my identity, my country, and how, in losing all of that, I found something I never imagined I would find, something that completely changed who I am. I want to tell this story from the beginning. Not just the dramatic parts, not just the moments that make a good video. I want to tell everything. The boring parts, the confusing parts, the parts where I wasn't sure about anything, the parts where I cried alone in my room, the parts where I questioned whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Because if I only tell you the best moment, you won't understand the true price this journey cost me, and you won't understand why, despite everything, I would do it all again. So, please stay with me. This will be a long conversation between you and me, but I promise that if you stay until the end, you'll hear something that could change your worldview, or at least it will change the way you see people like me. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a neighborhood in the eastern part of Amman. If you've never been to Amman, let me describe the city. It's a city built on hills. Everywhere you look, there are hills covered in white and beige buildings, stacked on top of each other like blocks. The call to prayer echoes through the streets 5 times a day. And when you're a child, that sound isn't religious. It's just the soundtrack of your life. It's the alarm clock in the morning. It's the signal that lunch is almost ready. It's the sound that warns you that the day is ending and you need to go home. My father, Hassan, was a teacher. He taught Arabic literature at a public school. He wasn't a rich man, but he was respected. In our neighborhood, people would stop him in the street for advice. He had a calm voice and a serious demeanor. And when he spoke, people listened. He was the kind of man who performed all the prayers at the mosque, not because anyone was watching, but because he truly believed. Islam wasn't just his religion. It was his entire identity. It was the lens through which he saw everything in the world. My mother, Fatima, was a homemaker. She was loving, kind, always cooking something. The smell of her kitchen is something I still remember in perfect detail. Cardamom, cumin, the sizzle of onions in olive oil, the steam rising from a pot of mansaf. She had soft hands and a gentle voice, and she called me Habibi countless times. She was also deeply religious. She wore the hijab, fasted during Ramadan with a joy I always admired, and used to read the Quran at night, her lips moving silently as her finger traced the lines of the Arabic text. I have 2 brothers and a sister. I'm the second child. My older brother, Tariq, was always the serious one. He wanted to be like my father, devoted, respected, constant. My younger brother, Omar, was the funny one, always cracking jokes, always getting into trouble, always finding a way to make my mother laugh, even when she was angry. My sister, Noor, was the youngest. She was quiet, always reading, always observing. She had big brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her without saying much. We were a typical Jordanian family, middle class, Muslim, conservative, but not extremist. My father didn't hit us. My mother didn't yell. We had disagreements like any family, but there was love in that house. True love. I want you to understand this, because what follows might make you think my family was made up of monsters. They weren't. They were people. They were products of their culture, their religion, their upbringing. And, in their world, what I ended up doing was the worst thing a son could do. When I was young, Islam was simply the water I swam in. I didn't question it any more than a fish questions water. I went to the mosque with my father every Friday. I memorized surahs for school. I fasted during Ramadan, even though I was very young, and my mother said I didn't need to. I wanted to make my father proud. I wanted him to put his hand on my head and say, "Good boy, Karim." That was motivation enough for me to do anything. At school, we had Islamic studies classes every day. We learned about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That's what they taught us to say after his name, and I would say it without thinking, like saying, "Bless you," after someone sneezes. We learned about the pillars of Islam, the stories of the prophets, the importance of the Ummah, the global Muslim community. We learned that Islam was the final and complete religion, that the Quran was the literal word of God, immutable and unalterable, and that Muhammad was the seal of the prophet, the last one. After him, there would be no more. Jesus, or Isa, as we called him, was also mentioned. He was a prophet, a great prophet, in fact. He performed miracles. He was born of a virgin. He was respected, but he was not God. He was not the Son of God. This idea, the idea that God could have a son, was considered shirk, the worst sin in Islam. It was the only thing God would never forgive. To associate partners with God, to equate someone with God, that was the ultimate betrayal. Ever since I learned to understand words, I've come to understand this. Jesus was a prophet, nothing more. The Christians were mistaken. They took a good man, a prophet, and transformed him into something he never claimed to be. They corrupted the original message. The Bible has been altered, modified, distorted over time. The Quran was the correction, the final word, the truth. I believed all of that completely, not because I had studied and come to my own conclusion, but because everyone around me believed it. My father, my mother, my teachers, my imam, my friends, the TV channels, the books on our shelves. Even the air I breathed in Amman carried that belief, and I never had a single reason to question it until I did it. It all started when I was about 19. I had finished high school and was studying engineering at the University of Jordan. My father was proud. Engineering was a good career. It meant stability, respectability. He would tell people, "My son Karim is studying engineering," and they would nod in approval. In Jordan, your children's achievements are your achievement. Your children's failures are your failure. That's how it works. At university, something changed. Not drastically. Not like a lightning bolt or a sudden revelation. It was more like a slow crack forming in a wall. You don't notice it at first. Then, one day, you realize that the crack has been growing for some time and is now big enough that you can no longer ignore it. The first thing that happened was that I met people different from me. This might sound silly to someone who grew up in a diverse environment, but in my neighborhood, in the east side of Amman, almost everyone was the same. Same religion, same background, same worldview. At university, I met students from different parts of Jordan, students from other countries, students who had grown up abroad and returned. I met Christian students, Jordanian Christians, who were a small minority but definitely present. I met secular students who didn't practice any specific religion. I met students who had traveled, who had read a lot, who asked questions I had never heard anyone ask. The second thing that happened was the internet. I know it seems obvious, but remember, I grew up in a house where information was controlled, not deliberately controlled, not like some authoritarian regime, but naturally controlled. The books in our house were Islamic books. The TV channels my father watched were religious channels. Conversations at family gatherings were guided by Islamic assumptions. But the internet was different. The internet had everything. And I was curious. I started watching debates, religious debates. Muslim academics versus Christian academics. Muslim academics versus atheists. I watched them because I wanted to feel proud of my faith. I wanted to see Islam brilliantly defended and the other side demolished. And sometimes that's exactly what happened. Sometimes the Muslim academic would present arguments that seemed powerful and convincing, and I would feel a surge of pride. But other times, something strange would. The Christian scholar would say something I couldn't easily ignore. Or the atheist would raise a question the Muslim scholar couldn't answer well. And instead of feeling proud, I felt uncomfortable. This discomfort was new to me. I didn't like it. So I'd close the video, distract myself with something else, and move on. But the questions didn't disappear. They remained in the back of my mind like seeds in the ground, waiting. One question in particular kept nagging at me. It wasn't a complicated theological question. In fact, it was very simple, and perhaps that's why it impacted me so much. The question was, how can I know if Islam is true? The question wasn't how to know if Islam claims to be true. Of course Islam claims to be true. All religions claim to be true. The question was deeper. How do I know for myself, independently, with my own mind and my own heart, that Islam is the truth? The answer I always received was, because the Quran says so. Because the Quran is a miracle. Because no one can produce anything similar. Because it has been perfectly preserved. Because Muhammad was the last prophet, and his message was the final message. But suddenly, these answers seemed circular. The Quran is true because it says it is true. Islam is the final religion because Islam says it is the final religion. Muhammad is the last prophet because the Quran says he is the last prophet. It was like saying, this book is correct because the book says it is correct. I felt guilty for thinking that way. I felt there was something wrong with me, as if Satan, was whispering in my ear, trying to lead me astray. That's what I had been taught. If you doubt Islam, it's not because the doubts are valid. It's because Satan is attacking you. The solution is to pray more, read the Quran more, seek refuge in God from the devil. So I tried that. I prayed more. I read the Quran more. I went to the mosque more often. I listened to lectures by Islamic scholars on YouTube. I tried to drown my doubts in devotion, but the questions kept resurfacing. One day, during my second year at university, something happened that changed the course of my life. It was something small, one of those things that only become significant when you look back years later. I was sitting in the university library, studying for a physics exam. A classmate of mine, named George, sat down across from me. George was a Jordanian Christian. We weren't close friends, but we had taken some classes together and were friendly. He was a good guy, quiet, kind, always willing to share his notes. That day, George had a book with him. It wasn't a textbook. It was a small, worn book with a leather cover. He placed it on the table next to his backpack and began to study. I glanced at it a few times, curious. Finally, I asked, "What book is that?" He looked at me, then at the book, and said, "It's the New Testament." I felt a strange reaction inside me. Not exactly fear, but something close to it. As if I had been caught looking at something I shouldn't have seen. In my upbringing, the Bible wasn't a forbidden book, but rather a corrupted one. A book that had been altered by human hand. A book that contained some truth, mixed with many errors. There was no need to read it because the Quran already had the corrected version of everything. But at that moment, sitting in that library, with questions already swirling in my mind, I felt an impulse toward that book. Not a dramatic or supernatural impulse, just curiosity. The same curiosity that makes us want to peek inside a room when someone tells us the door is locked. I said to George, "Can I take a look?" He seemed surprised. Then he said, "Of course," and handed it to me. I opened it to a random page. It opened to the Gospel of Matthew. I don't remember the exact passage, but I remember the feeling. The words were different from what I expected. They weren't what I'd been told. I'd been told the Bible was confusing, contradictory, full of errors, but the words I was reading were clear, simple, direct. I read it for about 5 minutes. Then I handed the paper back to George and said, "Thank you." He nodded and went back to studying. We didn't talk about it anymore. But that night, in my room, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had read. The words stayed with me. Not specific words. I couldn't quote them. But the feeling. There was something about those words that called to me, like a voice coming from a distant room that you can barely hear, but you know it's saying your name. That night, I did something I had never done before. I went online and searched for the Bible in English. I found it easily, and I started reading the Gospel of Matthew from the beginning. That night, I read for 3 hours. I read about the birth of Jesus. I read about John the Baptist. I read about the temptation in the desert. And then I came to the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I stopped reading. My heart was racing. I felt something hard to describe. It was like standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into a valley never before seen, vast, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. I felt as if those words were speaking directly to me, not to a crowd, not to a historical audience from 2,000 years ago, to me, Karim, sitting in his small room in East Amman, Jordan. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I was hungry. I was thirsty. I didn't know exactly for what, but I knew I longed for something that all my prayers, fasts, and trips to the mosque hadn't given me. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. I was scared, very scared, because I felt that something was starting, something I couldn't control, something that, if I followed it, would destroy everything I knew. And I was right. In the following months, I lived a double life. On the outside, I was the same Karim. I went to the mosque with my father. I prayed 5 times a day. I fasted. I attended Islamic lectures. I was the good Muslim son everyone expected me to be. But inside, I was in a completely different place. Every night, after my family went to sleep, I would open my laptop and read the New Testament. I read Matthew, then Mark, then Luke, then John. I read the Acts of the Apostles. I started reading Paul's letters, and with each chapter, each verse, each story, the crack in the wall of my old beliefs widened. Let me tell you what impressed me the most, because I think it's important for people to understand this. In Islam, the relationship between you and God is one of submission. That is literally the meaning of the word Islam, submission. You submit to God's will. You follow His commandments. You earn His favor through obedience. If you obey, you are rewarded. If you disobey, you are punished. It is, in many ways, a transactional relationship. I do good things. God gives me paradise. I do bad things. God sends me to hell. And even if you do everything right, there is no guarantee. God can do whatever He wants. He is not obligated to save you. There is a concept in Islam called tawakkul, trusting in God. But even that comes with uncertainty. You hope for the best, but you don't know. What I found in the New Testament was radically different. The God I encountered in Jesus' words was not primarily a God of transactions. He was a God of relationship, a God who didn't wait for people to come to Him, but who went to meet them, a God who compared Himself to a father running in search of his lost son, a God who compared Himself to a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep to find the one that is lost, a God who said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest. That word hit me like a punch in the gut, because I was so tired. I was tired of trying to earn God's approval. I was tired of the constant anxiety of not knowing if I was doing enough. I was tired of the fear that, perhaps, despite all my prayers, all my fasting, all my obedience, God might still reject me on Judgment Day. I was tired. And then Jesus says to me, "Come to me and rest." But it wasn't just theology that attracted me. It was the very person of Jesus. In Islam, we learn about the Prophet Muhammad and his life in detail. He was a military leader, a political ruler, a legislator, husband of several wives, a man who ordered executions, a man who waged war. I don't say this to insult him. I say this because it's recorded in Islamic history, in the hadiths, in the sirah, in the sources that Muslims themselves consider authentic. He was a man of power. Jesus was different. Jesus was a man who had all the power in the universe, if you believe what the Gospels say about him. And He chose weakness. He chose poverty. He chose service. He washed the feet of His disciples. He touched lepers. He ate with sinners and tax collectors. He defended an adulterous woman when the religious leaders wanted to stone her. And when they came to arrest Him, when they beat Him, when they nailed Him to a cross, He said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." I had never seen anything like it. In all my religious upbringing, I had never encountered a figure who responded to violence with forgiveness, to hatred with love, to injustice with mercy. It was so radically different from everything I had been taught that it was either the most beautiful truth in the world or the most dangerous lie. There was no middle ground, and I couldn't stop reading. I want to be honest with you about something. During that period, I wasn't just reading the Bible. I was also reading Islamic apologetic, arguments defending Islam and criticizing Christianity. I read about the supposed contradictions in the Bible. I read about the Council of Nicaea and the claim that Jesus' divinity was a political invention. I read about the textual history of the Bible and the claim that it has been altered over time. I read everything I could find on both sides. Here's what I discovered. The Islamic arguments against Christianity weren't as strong as I'd been led to believe. Many of them were based on misunderstandings about what Christians actually believe. The claim that the Trinity means Christians worship three gods, for example. That's not what the Trinity means. The claim that the Bible has been so corrupted that nothing in it is reliable. That doesn't align with the manuscript evidence. The claim that Jesus never claimed to be God, that depends on the passages you read and how you interpret them, but there are certainly passages where Jesus makes claims that only make sense if he believed himself to be divine. I'm not saying I had all the answers. I didn't. I still don't. But what I discovered was that the arguments in favor of Christianity were much stronger than I had been told, and the arguments against were much weaker. And the arguments in favor of Islam, when I examined them with the same critical eye, presented problems that I could no longer ignore. The preservation of the Quran, for example. I had learned that the Quran had been perfectly preserved, letter by letter, since the time of Muhammad. But, in researching this, I discovered that there are, in fact, different readings of the Quran, called qira'at, that contain variation. I found out that the third caliph, Uthman, ordered all variant copies of the Quran to be burned and standardized the text. Why would it be necessary to burn variant copies if the Quran had been perfectly preserved from the beginning? These were questions that troubled me. The historical accounts of Muhammad's life also disturbed me in ways that had never happened before. Certain hadiths, sayings and actions attributed to Muhammad, described things that I couldn't reconcile with a man whom I should consider the moral example for all of humanity, for all time. I won't go into specific details because I don't want to be disrespectful, but what I read in authentic Islamic sources that Muslim scholars themselves consider reliable, raised serious moral questions that I couldn't answer. However, the figure of Jesus, as described in the Gospels, became increasingly fascinating as I read. His teachings were not only morally beautiful, they were morally challenging. Love your enemy. Turn the other cheek. If someone takes your coat, give him your tunic as well. The last will be first, the first will be last. These were not comfortable teachings. They were revolutionary. They completely transformed the world's value system. And the fact that Jesus himself lived these teachings, not only preaching love but practicing it to the point of death, was something I couldn't ignore. I was falling, not disintegrating, falling towards something, and I didn't know how to stop, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you've ever questioned something you were raised to believe in, be it a religion, a political view, a family tradition, anything, you know how lonely that can be. It's like being in a room full of people and no one can see you. If you know that feeling, leave a comment below and tell me about it. You don't need to give details. I just want to know I'm not alone. And if this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel, because this will be a space where we share stories like this, real, honest, and human stories about faith, doubt, and transformation. Okay, let me continue. I need to talk about George, the boy from the library, because he became very important in this story. After that first day at the library, I went a long time without talking to George about religion. Weeks passed. Months. I read the Bible in secret, struggling with my own doubts, but I was too afraid to talk to anyone about it. In Jordan, you don't go up to someone and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of leaving Islam." That's not a conversation. It's a potential death sentence. Maybe not literally in Amman. Jordan is more moderate than some other countries, but socially? Absolutely. It would mean the end of your relationships, your reputation, possibly your safety. But George and I became closer as classmates. We studied together for exam. Sometimes we had lunch together. We talked about engineering, about our professors, about football, about movies, normal things, and all the while, I watched him. Not suspiciously, but curious. I observed how he lived. And what I realized was this: George was different from many people I knew, but not in an obvious or flashy way. He was kind in a discreet way. He was patient. When other students were gossiping or complaining about someone, George would remain silent or gently redirect the conversation. When someone needed help, he offered without being asked. When he made a promise, he kept it. He was the most consistent person I've ever known. There was no difference between who he was in public and who he was in private, at least as far as I could tell. One day, I finally asked him. We were sitting on a bench outside the engineering building, eating sandwiches. I was so nervous that my hands were shaking a little, but I had been carrying this question for months and couldn't hold it in any longer. I said, "George, can I ask you something personal?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Why are you the way you are?" He chuckled a little and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean, you're different. You're kind. You're honest. You don't talk behind people's backs. You don't get angry easily. What makes you like that?" He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I try to follow Jesus. I don't always succeed, but I try." That was it. He didn't lecture me. He didn't give me a theological sermon. He didn't try to convert me. He simply answered my question with sincerity and honesty. And that simplicity was more powerful than any sermon I had ever heard. After that, we were silent for a while. Then I said, very carefully, choosing each word as if I were walking through a minefield, "I have been reading the New Testament." The expression on his face, I'll never forget it. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't triumph, like, I did it. It was concern. He looked at me with genuine concern, as if he immediately understood the weight of what I was saying, the danger of what I was admitting, the implications of where this could lead. He said, "Karim, are you okay?" It wasn't, "That's great," nor, "Do you want to go to church?" nor, "Let me explain the gospel to you." Just, "Are you okay?" Because he knew. He knew that, for a young Muslim man in Jordan, reading the Bible wasn't just a hobby. It was a crisis. I said, "I don't know." And then something happened that I didn't expect. I started to cry. Right there, on the bench, in broad daylight, with students walking by, I started to cry. Because, for the first time in months, I had told the truth out loud to another human being. I carried this secret, this terrifying, beautiful, and confusing secret, and its weight was crushing me. And now, I was sharing it with someone, and the relief was immense. George didn't say anything. He just sat with me. He put his hand on my shoulder. He let me cry. And when I finally stopped, when I wiped away the tears, felt ashamed, and started to apologize, he said, "You don't need to apologize. This is very serious, and you don't need to deal with this alone." That was the beginning of a friendship that would save my life, literally. In the following months, George and I began to meet privately, not at the university, where people could see us and ask questions. We met in a quiet coffee shop in the west side of Amman, a more liberal, cosmopolitan part of the city, where a Muslim and a Christian sitting together, talking about religion, wouldn't attract attention. George didn't pressure me. He didn't make me suffer. He answered my questions when I asked them, and was honest when he didn't know the answer. He didn't pretend that Christianity didn't have difficult questions or intellectual challenges. He was honest about his own doubts and struggles, and that honesty made me trust him more than any eloquent preacher could. I asked him about the Trinity. He explained it as best he could, acknowledging that it is a mystery, not a mathematical equation. He said, "I myself don't fully understand it, but I believe in it because I see it in the scriptures and because I experience it in my life. I experience God as Father, as Son, and as Holy Spirit. They are not three gods. It is one God in three persons. I know it doesn't make logical sense in the way we usually think, but love doesn't always make logical sense either." I asked him about the crucifixion. In Islam, we learn that Jesus wasn't actually crucified, that God made it appear that he was, and someone else was placed on the cross in his place. George said, "Why would God deceive everyone in this way? Why would God allow billions of people to believe a lie for 2,000 years? And if Jesus wasn't crucified, then what about the empty tomb, and the resurrection, and the hundreds of eyewitnesses who saw him alive after his death, and the fact that his disciples who were terrified and hiding, suddenly became bold enough to preach about him and die for that message? I didn't have answers to those questions. I realized that the Islamic explanation of the crucifixion raised more problems than it solved. I asked George about suffering, about why God would allow his own son to be tortured and killed. George said, "That's the main point. God didn't remain distant and safe while we suffered. He entered into our suffering. He experienced it personally. The cross is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a love so extreme that it is willing to absorb the worst that evil can do and respond not with vengeance, but with forgiveness." Something inside me broke when he said that. Something that held me together, that sustained me in my old faith, that maintained the wall I had built around my identity. It shattered, and through that shattering, light flooded everything. I want to tell you about the night that changed everything. The night I call my night of surrender. It was a Thursday. I remember because the next day was Friday, the Islamic holy day, and I was supposed to go to the mosque with my father for Jumu'ah prayers, the great congregational prayer of the week. This was about 14 months after I first opened George's New Testament in the library. I was reading the Gospel of John, more specifically, chapter 14, where Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And chapter 15, where he says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." These words terrified me because they left no room for compromise. Jesus wasn't saying, "I am one of many ways to God." He was saying, "I am the way." He wasn't saying, "I am a good teacher among many good teachers." He was saying, "Without me, you can do nothing." If those words were true, then everything I had been taught would be wrong. Islam was wrong. Muhammad was wrong. My father was wrong. My mother was wrong. My teachers were wrong. Everyone I loved, trusted, and respected was wrong. And I, Karim, sitting in my room in Amman, was being forced to accept this truth, even if it cost me everything. If these words were false, then I was being deceived. I was being seduced by a lie, and I needed to close this book, forget everything, and return to my old life. I couldn't live in the lukewarm anymore. I'd been living like this for over a year, and it was destroying me. I was anxious all the time. I was losing weight. I couldn't concentrate on my studies. I lied to everyone I loved, every day. I recited Muslim prayers while my heart was elsewhere. I fasted during Ramadan, but secretly believed that salvation wasn't achieved through fasting. I was splitting in two, and if I didn't choose a path, I would fall apart. That Thursday night, I locked my bedroom door. I turned off all the lights. I sat on the floor. And I did something I'd never done before. I prayed to Jesus, not to Allah, not to God in the abstract and impersonal way I had always prayed. I prayed to Jesus, by name. I said, and I remember these words exactly because they are etched in my memory. I said, "Jesus, I don't know if you are who they say you are. I don't know if you are the Son of God. I don't know if you are the way, the truth, and the life. But I know I'm lost. I know I'm broken. I know I've been searching for something my whole life and haven't found it. If you are real, if you are who the Bible says you are, then please show me. Please come into my life. Please save me, because I can't save myself." I sat there in the dark, waiting. I don't know what I was waiting for. A voice from heaven, a vision, an angel appearing in my room, something dramatic, something undeniable. What happened was much quieter than that, and much more impactful. I felt a warmth, not a physical warmth, like someone had turned on a heater, an inner warmth, a warmth that started in the center of my chest and spread outward, like a gentle wave running through my entire body. And with the warmth came a feeling that I can only describe as peace. Peace. True peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something good, something so good that conflict no longer mattered. Fear didn't matter. Danger didn't matter. The potential loss of everything didn't matter, because in that moment, sitting on the floor of my dark room, I knew. I didn't think. I didn't expect. I knew that I wasn't alone, that I had never been alone, that there was a God who wasn't distant, impersonal, and unfathomable, but who was there, in that room, closer to me than my own breath, and he loved me. Not because I had earned it, not because I deserved it, not because I had prayed enough, fasted enough, or been good enough. He loved me because love was who he was, and nothing I had done or would ever do could change that. I lay on that floor for a long time. I don't know how long, hours maybe, and I cried the whole time. But these were different tears from the ones I shed on that bench with George. Those tears were tears of confusion, fear. These tears were tears of relief, of joy, of being home. When I finally got up, it was already past 2 in the morning. My family was asleep. The house was silent. I washed my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked the same brown eyes, the same dark hair, the same face I saw every day of my life. But something behind those eyes had changed, something fundamental, something irreversible. I whispered to myself very softly, so softly that the words barely formed in the air, "I believe," and I believed. With all that I was, with every fiber of my being, I believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, that he died on the cross for my sins, that he rose from the dead, and that he was offering me a new life. I was terrified of the price that belief would cost me, but I believed. The following morning, Friday, I went to the mosque with my father. I want you to reflect on this for a moment. I had given my life to Christ the night before, and the next morning I was in a mosque, shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of Muslim men, performing the rituals of Islamic prayer, bowing, prostrating myself, reciting words in Arabic that I no longer believed to be absolute truth. I felt like a traitor to my father, to the men around me, to myself. I felt like the biggest hypocrite in the world. But what would the alternative be? To stand up in the middle of prayer and announce, "Now I am a Christian"? I would have been beaten, possibly killed, at the very least, dragged home by my father and subjected to, I didn't even want to think about what. So I continued with the double life, and it got harder instead of easier. Every morning, I would wake up and put on old Karim's mask. I would pray Fajr, the dawn prayer, with my family. I would have breakfast with them. I would go to university. I would return home. I would pray Maghrib and Isha, the afternoon and evening prayers, with my father. I did everything a good Muslim son should do, and every night, behind the locked door, I read the Bible. I prayed to Jesus. I whispered to George on the phone, and I felt the chasm between my inner world and my outer world widen each day. The hardest part was lying to my mother. My father was a serious man, and I could hide things from him because we didn't talk about feelings. But my mother was different. She sensed things. She knew me the way mothers know their children, intuitively, instinctively. She started asking me if I was okay. She said I looked tired. She said I seemed distant. She said I wasn't eating enough. I told her I was stressed about college. I told her the engineering course was demanding. I told her I was okay, just busy. She looked at me with those kind, worried eyes and said, "You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you, Habibi?" And I replied, "Of course, Mom. Everything's fine." Every time I lied to her, a piece of my soul withered away. George realized I was having difficulty. He started connecting me with a small, clandestine group of believers, people who had converted from Islam to Christianity and were living secretly in Amman. There weren't many of them, maybe 15 or 20. They met in different locations each time, for safety. An apartment here, a back room in a company there, never the same place twice. The first time I went to one of those meetings, I was trembling with fear. I took a huge detour, going back several times to make sure no one was following me. When I got to the apartment, a small, modest place in a residential neighborhood, George was waiting for me outside. He saw the fear on my face and said, "It's okay. Everyone here has been exactly where you are now. They understand." Inside, there were about 12 people, men and women, of different ages. A gentleman who must have been about 50 years old. A young woman my age wearing a hijab. She couldn't stop wearing it without arousing suspicion. A middle-aged couple who held hands and smiled at me when I entered. They welcomed me as if I were family. No, better than that. They welcomed me as if I were a lost brother who had finally found his way home. There were hugs. There were tears. Not of sadness, but of joy. They knew what it meant for me to be there. They knew the risk. They knew the courage it required, and they honored that. We sang hymns. Silently, with the windows and curtains closed, we prayed. We read the scriptures together. Someone shared her testimony. A woman named Amira, who had been converted 5 years earlier and had been rejected by her entire family. She spoke about it with a mixture of sadness and peace that I found beautiful and moving at the same time. In that small, secret room, I felt something I had never felt in any mosque. I felt the presence of God, not the distant, fearsome, and unfathomable God of my Islamic upbringing, but a God who was close, a personal God, a God who was in the room with us, who embraced us, who knew each of us by name and loved us intensely. I want to tell you something that might sound strange. In Islam, the mosque can be incredibly beautiful. The architecture, the calligraphy, the ritual, everything can be genuinely beautiful. But in all my years of attending the mosque, I never felt the presence of God there. I felt reverence. I felt tradition. I felt community. But I didn't feel God. Not personally, not intimately. In that cramped apartment, with 12 faithful crammed together like the first Christians hiding from the Roman Empire, I felt the presence of God, and I knew I was exactly where I should be. The double life lasted almost 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years practicing Muslim prayers while silently praying to Jesus. 2 years hiding Bible, deleting browser history, making up excuses, and feeling like I was being slowly torn apart. It ended on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was at university. My cell phone vibrated. It was a message from my brother Tariq, the older, serious one. He wrote just one sentence. "Come home now." No explanation. Just come home now. The tone of the message, even in writing, gave me chills. Tariq wasn't the dramatic type. If he said, "Come home now," something serious had happened. I practically ran to the bus stop. The whole trip home, my mind was racing. Had someone died? Was someone sick? Had there been an accident? When I got home, I noticed my father's car was in the garage, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon. He should have been at school. I went in through the front door. The living room was empty. The TV was off. The house was silent in a way that felt ominous, like the silence before a storm. Then I heard my father's voice coming from the dining room. "Karim, come in here." I entered the dining room. My father was seated at the head of the table. My mother was seated beside him, her eyes red, as if she had been crying. Tariq stood near the window, arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. Omar, my younger brother, wasn't there. He was probably at school. Nor wasn't there either. On the table, in the center, was my Bible. The little Bible that George finally gave me as a gift. The one I kept hidden in my room, inside a hollow engineering book. Someone found it. My father looked at me. His face was calm, but it was the calmness of a man who stands firm only through sheer willpower. His eyes weren't angry. They were wounded, deeply wounded. He said, "What is this?" I could have lied. I could have said it was a textbook. I could have said a friend had left it, and I was going to return it. I could have said I was studying to learn how to debate with Christians, something some Muslim apologists actually do. I could have found 100 ways to justify everything, but I was so tired of lying, so exhausted by the deception. 2 years of hiding who I really was had drained me to such an extent that the idea of yet another lie was physically unbearable. So I told the truth. I said, "It's a Bible, and I've been reading it for 2 years, and I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. My mother's hand went to her mouth. A sound came out of it that I will never forget. A sound that was neither a scream nor a cry, but something in between. The sound of a mother's heart breaking in real time. Tariq's face contorted. He took a step toward me. "What did you say?" My father raised his hand, interrupting Tariq. He didn't take his eyes off me. His expression didn't change. That terrifying calm remained. He said, "Repeat that." I said, "I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I believe that he died for my sins and rose from the dead. I am a Christian." Tariq exploded. He grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and threw me against the wall. "Are you crazy?" he yelled. "Have you lost your mind?" Do you know what you're saying? Do you know what this means? My father stood up. Tariq, let him go. Tariq let go of me, but didn't move away. He was breathing heavily, his face inches from mine. Who did this to you? He demanded. Who corrupted you? Was it someone from the university? A missionary? Tell me. I said, no one corrupted me. I studied both religions. I made a choice. A choice? Tariq laughed bitterly. You chose hell. You chose to be a kafir. You chose to throw away everything our parents taught us, everything our family represents, everything that defines us. Why? For the religion of the Crusaders? For people who have been killing Muslims for 1,000 years? My mother was sobbing. She kept repeating, oh Allah, incessantly, rocking back and forth in her chair. It was the worst sound in the world, worse than Tariq's anger, worse than my father's silence. My mother's pain was worse than any physical blow. My father raised his hand again. Silence, everyone. The room fell silent, except for my mother's muffled sobs. My father looked at me with those wounded eyes and said, very slowly, very deliberately, you have a chance to retract what you just said. You are confused. You were deceived. Satan whispered to you, and you listened. But it's not too late yet. Recite the Shahada right now. Say, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Say that, and we will forget this ever happened. We will get help for you. We will take you to an imam. We will resolve this. He was giving me a way out, a path back to safety, a path back to my family, my home, my old life. All I had to do was recite one phrase, a phrase I had recited thousands of times before, and everything would go back to normal. I wanted to accept. My God, how I wanted to accept. Looking at my mother's tears, feeling Tariq's anger, seeing the pain in my father's eyes, I wanted to say those words and make it all stop. A part of me, the part that was still a frightened boy who only wanted his father's approval, screamed for me to say the Shahada and end this nightmare. But I couldn't, because it would have been a lie. And I had been lying for 2 years, and I couldn't anymore. I couldn't stand before the God who revealed himself to me in that dark room, the God who showed me a love beyond anything I had ever known, and deny him in order to save myself. I thought of Peter, the Apostle Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times on the night Jesus was arrested. And I thought of the look Jesus gave Peter after the 3rd denial, a look that the Gospel of Luke describes with devastating simplicity. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. He simply looked at him, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. I didn't want to be Peter, not at that moment. So I said, I can't, Baba. I love you. I love this family. But I can't deny what I know to be true. I believe in Jesus, and nothing you say or do will change that. My father stood there, motionless, for a long time. Then he said the words I told you at the beginning of this story. You are no longer my son. He said it calmly, without shouting, without anger. That only made things worse. If he had shouted, I could have convinced myself that he was just emotional, that he didn't mean it, that he would calm down and retract his statement. But he said it the way he always said everything, carefully, deliberately, with every sincere word. He said, take your things and get out of this house. You have 1 hour. Then he turned and left the room. My mother whimpered. Tariq grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairs. Go pack your things and get out of here, he hissed. To this family, you're dead. I went to my room dazed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the closet. I packed a small bag, some clothes, my laptop, my Bible, a photo of my family I grabbed from my desk. I didn't know where I was going. I had no plan. I was 21 years old and about to be homeless. As I was leaving, my sister Noor appeared in the hallway. She had just come home and must have heard what happened. She was 14 at the time. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those big brown eyes, and I could see that she didn't understand. She didn't understand why her brother was leaving. She didn't understand why everyone was crying and screaming. She was just a child, and her world was falling apart. I hugged her. I whispered, I love you, Noor. I will always love you. I'm sorry. She clung to me for a moment. Then Tariq shouted from downstairs, Get out of here, Karim! And she let go of me. I went down the stairs, through the front door, and out into the street. The door closed behind me. I heard the click of the lock, and so, suddenly, I was alone. The following months were the most difficult of my life. George welcomed me. He lived with his parents, and they were kind enough to let me sleep in the guest room for a few weeks. But I couldn't stay there for long. George's family already faced social pressure for being Christian in a predominantly Muslim neighborhood, and having a convert to Islam living in their home would attract unwanted attention. George helped me find a small apartment in the west side of Amman. It was tiny, a room with a mattress on the floor, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. The rent was low, but even so, it was difficult to pay. I got a part-time job at a cell phone repair shop in the city. The salary barely covered the rent and food. I continued attending university, but my grades dropped drastically. It was difficult to concentrate on thermodynamics and structural analysis when my whole life had just fallen apart. I lost contact with my family almost completely. My mother called me once, about a week after I left. She was crying. She begged me to come home, to repent, to say the Shahada. She said, "Please, Karim, come back. We'll get through this together. I can't lose my son." I started crying too. I said, "Mom, I love you so much, but I can't go back to something I don't believe in. I can't pretend." She cried even more. Then my father's voice came on the line, rough and cold. "Don't call this number again." And the call dropped. I tried calling again a few days later. The number had changed. Tariq sent me a message through a mutual acquaintance. The message said, "If I see you near our family, I'll hurt you. Stay away." I took this threat seriously. Tariq wasn't a violent man by nature, but honor was everything in our culture, and I had shamed the family in the worst possible way. People do things they never imagined they were capable of when they feel their honor has been violated. I was alone, truly, profoundly alone, in a way I had never experienced before. I lost my family. I lost most of my friends, because in a collectivist society like Jordan, when your family rejects you, people take sides, and almost always side with the family. Some friends from university kept in touch, but even they were cautious. Being associated with an apostate could bring problems. The underground church group became my lifeline. Those 12 or 15 secret believers were now my family. We met every week, and those meetings were the only thing keeping me sane. We would meet in someone's apartment, sing softly, pray, study the Bible together, and share our struggles. Everyone in that group had lost something because of their faith. Some had lost families, some had lost jobs, some had lost friends. One man had been beaten by his own brothers. One woman had been locked in her room for a month by her parents. These were people who understood pain and understood what it meant to choose faith despite pain. There was a man in the group, Ahmad, who became like a father to me. He was in his 50s, had converted from Islam 20 years earlier, and had lived as a secret Christian in Amman all that time. His own family had rejected him decades ago. He had rebuilt his life, piece by piece, and possessed a serene wisdom that came from years of walking a difficult path. Ahmad told me something I will never forget. He said, "Karim, you are in the desert now. Do you know what the desert is? It's the place where God removes everything that is not essential so that you can see what really matters." Moses was in the desert for 40 years. The Israelites were in the desert for 40 years. Even Jesus went to the desert before beginning his ministry. The desert is not a punishment, it's a preparation. God is not finished with you yet. He is only just beginning. These words sustained me through some very dark nights. Nights when I lay on the mattress on the floor of that small apartment and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Nights when I missed my mother so much that the pain was physical, like a weight on my chest. Nights when I questioned everything, not my faith in Jesus, which remained strong even in the darkness, but my own strength, my own capacity to endure. I want to be honest with you. There were nights when I thought about going back, simply showing up at my parents' door, reciting the Shahada, and letting them welcome me back. I could have lived that double life again. I lived it for 2 years. I could have done it indefinitely. I could have prayed Muslim prayers outside and followed Jesus inside, and no one would ever have known. But I knew I couldn't. Not because it was morally wrong, although it was, but because the person I was becoming in Christ was fundamentally incompatible with that kind of deception. Jesus said, "The truth will set you free," and he was right. The truth set me free. But freedom was harder than captivity. Freedom was lonelier. Freedom hurt more. At least in captivity, you have company. Ahmad reminded me of a verse from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecution, and in the age to come, eternal life, along with the persecutions." Jesus was honest about this. He didn't promise that following him would be easy. He didn't promise comfort, security, and acceptance. He promised persecution. But he also promised that the gain would be greater than the loss, 100 times greater. I clung to that promise with all my might. I want to pause here for a second. This part of the story is difficult for me to tell, and I know it might be difficult for some of you to hear. But I believe stories like this matter. They matter because they remind us that faith isn't free. Following what we believe in always comes at a price. And if this story moved you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share this video. You never know who might be secretly watching, like I was secretly reading the Bible, desperately needing to know they're not alone. Okay, let me tell you what happened next. Over the following year, several things happened that strengthened my faith in ways I didn't expect. The first was baptism. I had been a believer for about 2.5 years, almost a year of secret reading, plus the time since my conversion, when I told the underground group that I wanted to be baptized. Ahmad was the one who baptized me. We did it at night, in a small river on the outskirts of Amman, about an hour's drive from the city. 5 members of the group attended. George was there. It was dark. The water was cold. The stars shone, millions of them, as if God had poured a bag of diamonds across the sky. Ahmad was in the water with me, waist deep, and he said, "Karim, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Lord and Savior?" I said, "Yes, I accept." He said, "Therefore I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." And he lowered me into the water. Since that night on my bedroom floor, I've had many powerful spiritual experiences in my life, but nothing compares to the moment I emerged from that river. I felt as if every sin, every lie, every moment of hypocrisy, every fear, every shame, it had all been washed away, gone, not repressed, not covered up, gone. I came out of that water and I was clean, not morally perfect. I knew I would still struggle, still fail, still sin, but clean in a fundamental spiritual sense, as if my soul had been cleansed and the dirt of a lifetime had been removed. I cried again. It seems I cry a lot in this story, but these were tears of pure joy. George was crying too. Ahmad smiled, that calm, experienced smile of a man who has walked this path and knows exactly how it feels. That night, as we drove back to Amman, I sat in the back seat of George's car and watched the dark hills of Jordan pass by the window. And I thought to myself, whatever happens next, whatever happens to me, whatever I lose, this is real. This is the truest thing that has ever happened to me, and nobody can take that away from me. The second thing that strengthened my faith was suffering. And I'm not referring to the suffering I had already experienced, family rejection, loneliness, poverty. I'm referring to a specific event that tested everything I believed in. About 4 months after my baptism, I was returning home from the cell phone repair shop one night. It was twilight. The streets were quieter than usual. I turned onto my street and noticed 2 men standing near the entrance to my building. I didn't recognize them. They were young, perhaps in their late 20s, wearing jeans and leather jackets. They were smoking and looking at their cell phone. Something about them made me uneasy, but I told myself it was paranoia. Amman was generally safe. I walked past them towards the door. One of them said, "Karim." I stopped. I turned around. "Yes?" The other stepped forward and said, "We know who you are. We know you have abandoned Islam. Your brother Tariq sent us." Before I could answer, the first one punched me in the stomach, hard. I doubled over, gasping. Then the second grabbed me by the hair and slammed my head against the wall. I felt something warm running down my face, blood from a cut on my forehead. One of them kicked me while I was on the ground. The other leaned over and whispered, "Go back to Islam, Kafir, or next time it will be worse." Then they left, just like that, without further ado. They walked away calmly, as if they had just completed a routine task. I lay on the sidewalk for several minutes, bleeding, unable to move. Finally, I managed to get up and stagger to my apartment. I wiped the blood from my face, pressed a cloth over the cut, and sat on the mattress. And do you know what I felt? After the shock passed, after the pain turned into a dull throbbing, do you know what I felt? I felt closer to Jesus than I ever have before, because Jesus was also flogged. Jesus also bled. Jesus lay on the ground while people spat on him, mocked him, and assaulted him. And he did not retaliate. He did not call down fire from heaven. He said, "Father, forgive them." I sat on the mattress in my small apartment, blood drying on my forehead, and prayed for the men who had beaten me. I prayed for Tariq, who had sent them, and I prayed from the heart. Not because I'm some kind of saint. I'm not. I'm an imperfect, broken, ordinary man. But because in that moment, I understood something about forgiveness that I had previously only grasped intellectually. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It's a choice. It's the decision not to let hatred take root in your heart, even when you have every reason to hate. And that choice, that incredibly difficult and almost impossible choice, is what separates the kingdom of God from the kingdom of this world. I didn't report the assault to the police. In Jordan, an apostate who complained of being beaten for abandoning Islam wouldn't receive much sympathy. The law could technically protect me, but the culture didn't. So, I remained silent. I recovered. The cut on my forehead left a small scar that I still have today. I consider it a badge of honor. The third thing that strengthened my faith was a dream. I know some of you may be skeptical about this. I understand. If someone had told me this story before my conversion, I would have been skeptical too. But I'm telling you what happened to me, and I'll let you decide what to think about it. About 6 months after the attack, I had a dream. In the dream, I was walking through a desert. Not the beautiful Wadi Rum desert, with its red sand and impressive rock formation. It was an arid, empty, flat desert. No striking features, no landmarks, just sand in every direction, as far as the eye could see. And I walked, but I didn't know where I was going. I was thirsty. I was exhausted. I was alone. Then I spotted a figure in the distance, a man standing, facing me. As I approached, the man became clearer. He was dressed in white, not a bright, dazzling white, but a soft, warm white, like cream or sunlight. He had dark hair and eyes and a face that was somehow both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. A face full of kindness, strength, and something else. Something I can only describe as authority. I stopped a few meters from him, and he smiled at me. It was the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. Not because it was perfect. It was the smile of a real person, with real wrinkles around his eyes and a genuine warmth in his expression. It was beautiful because it was directed at me, completely, totally, exclusively, as if I were the only person in the world, as if I were the reason he was there, in that desert. He said one word, "Follow." That was it. One word, "Follow." I woke up. It was the dead of night. My heart was pounding. My face was wet with tears, and I felt a certainty that I can't explain rationally. A certainty that went beyond logic, beyond evidence, beyond arguments. I knew, deep down, that the man in my dream was Jesus, and I knew that his invitation, "Follow him," wasn't just for that moment. It was for the rest of my life. Since then, I've discovered that dreams about Jesus are incredibly common among Muslim converts. Thousands of people in the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia have reported similar dreams. Dreams of a man in white, dreams of warmth and peace, dreams that led them to investigate Christianity and eventually convert. I don't claim to understand everything completely, but I believe that God meets people where they are, and in cultures where dreams are considered significant, God uses dreams. After the beating, I knew that staying in Amman was becoming dangerous. Tariq knew where I lived. He could send people again, and next time, they might not stop at a few punches and kicks. George and Ahmad helped me develop a plan. There was a Christian organization that helped persecuted converts. I won't mention it for security reasons, and they had contacts in several countries willing to receive and help people like me. The process wasn't simple. It involved paperwork, interview, checks. They needed to confirm that my conversion was genuine and that I was in real danger. It took months. During those months, I continued working at the cell phone repair shop, continued attending clandestine church meetings, continued living in my small apartment, but I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Every unfamiliar face on the street could be a threat. Every knock on the door made my heart race. I started sleeping poorly. I lost more weight. Stress was consuming me. I want to tell you about a moment from that period that gave me hope. A small moment, but one that made all the difference. I was at work one day when my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. I cautiously opened. It said, "Karim, this is Noor. I got your number from a friend of a friend. I miss you. I love you. I'm praying for you." Noor, my little sister. She was 16 at the time. She had found a way to contact me, despite my father's prohibition. She was crossing the chasm that had opened up between us, risking punishment, just to tell me that she loved me and missed me. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "I love you too, Noor, more than you can imagine. Please be well." She replied, "I've been reading some things. I have some questions. Can we meet?" My heart nearly stopped. Noor was reading? Reading what? The Bible? Christian material? Was she going through the same journey as me? The thought filled me with hope and terror. Hope because the idea that my sister might find the same truth I had was beautiful. Terror because I knew the price she would have to pay. I told her it was very dangerous for us to meet. I told her to be careful. I said that if she had any doubts, she could text me, but that she should make sure no one saw her phone. We exchanged a few more messages in the following weeks. She didn't tell me exactly what she was reading or thinking, and I didn't press her. The fact that she got in touch, the fact that the door wasn't completely closed, gave me strength during a very difficult time. Later, I discovered that Noor had actually been exploring Christianity on her own. But that's her story, not mine, and it's still unfolding. The organization finally helped me. They arranged my trip to a country in Europe. I'll say it was a northern European country, but I won't give more details for security reasons. They provided me with airfare, temporary accommodation, and connected me with a religious community specializing in welcoming and supporting converts from a Muslim background. Leaving Jordan was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Harder than confronting my father, harder than the beating. Because leaving meant accepting that it was real, that it was permanent, that I might never go home again. Maybe I'd never see my mother again. Maybe I'd never walk the streets of eastern Amman again. Hear the call to prayer echoing through the hills. Eat mansaf in my mother's kitchen. I wasn't just changing religions. I was changing worlds. The night before my flight, I went to the underground church meeting for the last time. Everyone was there. Ahmad, George, Amira, all of them. They had prepared a small farewell for me. Nothing extravagant. A little food, some prayers, some songs. But the love in that place was so palpable, you could almost touch it. Ahmad prayed for me. He placed his hands on my head, like my father used to do when I was a boy, and said, "Lord, protect this young man. He is your son. He has given up everything for you. Now go before him and prepare the way. Give him courage when he is afraid. Give him strength when he is weak. Give him friends when he is alone. And one day, Lord, if it is your will, bring him back home." Everyone said, "Amen." I was crying. George was crying. Even Ahmad, that tough old man who survived 20 years as a secret Christian in Jordan, had tears in his eyes. I hugged each one of them. I tried to memorize their faces. I tried to memorize the feeling of being in that room with those people, because I didn't know if I would ever feel it again. The next morning, George drove me to the airport. We were silent the whole way. At the departure terminal, he parked the car and walked me to the entrance. We stood there for a moment, two young people in a busy airport, knowing that this was a kind of end. He said, "Remember what Ahmad said, God goes before you." I said, "Thank you, George, for everything. You changed my life." He shook his head. "I didn't change anything. I just gave you a book." We hugged. I grabbed my suitcase and went into the airport without looking back, because I knew that if I did, I might not be able to keep walking. The plane trip was surreal. I had only flown once before, a short domestic flight within Jordan. This time, I was flying over the Mediterranean, over Europe, to a country I had never been to, where I didn't speak the language, where I didn't know a single person, where the weather would be cold and gray, nothing like the hot, dry hills of Amman. I sat on the windowsill and watched Jordan disappear beneath the clouds. The brown, rolling landscape that had been my entire world for 23 years shrank to a miniature size and then vanished. I placed my hand on the glass and whispered, "Goodbye." When the plane landed, I was greeted at the airport by a woman from the church that was hosting me. Her name was Anna. She was in her early 40s, blonde, with a kind face and a welcoming smile. She was holding a sign with the name Karim in large letters. And when she saw me, tired, confused, carrying a single suitcase with all my belongings, she came over and gave me a hug. A stranger hugged me. In the Middle East, you don't hug strangers, but Anna hugged me as if she'd known me all her life. And in that hug, I felt the promise of the verse from Mark, brothers, sisters, and mothers, being fulfilled in real time. Anna drove me to a small apartment the church had provided. It was modest, but clean and cozy. There was a bed, a real bed, not a mattress on the floor. There was a small kitchen with food in the refrigerator. There were towels in the bathroom. On the kitchen table, there was a card that read, "Welcome back, Karim. We are now your family." I sat up in bed, looked around the room, and felt an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was safety. I felt safe. For the first time in years, I didn't need to look over my shoulder. I didn't need to whisper my prayers. I didn't need to hide my Bible. I didn't need to lie about who I was. I was in a place where I could be Karim, the real Karim, the complete Karim, without fear. I put my face in my hands and wept. Not tears of sadness, nor tears of joy, tears of relief. The deep, trembling relief that took over my whole body, of a man who had been running for years and finally stopped. The church community that welcomed me was incredible. It was a diverse group, some from the country itself, some immigrants from other parts of Europe, some refugees from the Middle East and Africa. There were other converts from Islam in the congregation, people from Iran, Egypt, Afghanistan, Pakistan, people with stories like mine, stories of secret faith, family rejection, persecution, flight. We formed a bond unlike anything I had ever experienced, the bond of people who had suffered for the same reason and found strength in the same source. The church helped me navigate the asylum process, which was complicated and stressful. They helped me learn the local language. They helped me find work. They helped me adapt to a culture very different from the one I grew up in. The cultural adaptation was enormous. Everything was different. The climate, cold, gray, damp, a shock for someone from the Middle East. The food, unfamiliar and, frankly, bland compared to my mother's cooking. The social norms, people were polite, but distant in a way that confused someone from a culture where hospitality and affection are fundamental. The pace of life, fast, efficient, individualistic. In Jordan, your neighbors know your name, your family, your job. Here, I could live in an apartment building for months and never know my neighbor's name. But there were also wonderful things. Religious freedom was real here, not just theoretical. I could walk into a church on Sunday morning without fear. I could carry a Bible in my bag without having to hide it. I could speak openly, loudly, in public about Jesus. I could sing hymns of praise at full volume. The first time I attended a Sunday church service, not a secret meeting in a locked apartment, but a real service in a real church building with stained glass windows, a pipe organ, and 100 people singing together. I was moved. I stood on the pew, tears streaming down my face as the congregation sang a hymn I had only heard whispered. This is how worship should be, without hiding, without whispering, without trembling, singing, loudly, together, without fear. Life in my new country wasn't easy, even with the support of the church. Asylum processes take time. Learning a new language takes time. Building a new life from scratch takes time. And there were moments of profound loneliness and homesickness that no amount of support from the religious community could completely cure. I missed my mother every day. I missed the smell of her kitchen. I missed hearing her voice calling me Habibi, Aidi. I missed her hands, the way she caressed my face when she wanted to say something important. Some nights, the longing was so intense, it felt like a physical hole in my chest, a void that nothing could fill. I missed the sounds of Amman, the call to prayer, the honking of traffic horns, the conversations in Arabic that reached us through open windows, the sound of a cup of tea being placed on a metal tray. These sounds were the soundtrack of my life, and in their absence, the world seemed strangely silent. I missed my sister Noor. We still texted occasionally, but it was brief and cautious. She was growing up without me. She turned 16, then 17, then 18. I was missing her adolescence, her graduation, her everyday life. I was the older brother, thousands of miles away, unable to protect her, unable to guide her, unable to be the brother she needed. But I was also growing up. In the absence of everything familiar to me, I was discovering who I was, not who my family wanted me to be, not who my culture told me I should be, not who Islam defined me as, but who Karim truly was, in his essence, stripped of all external identity. I discovered I was stronger than I thought, not in a macho or tough way, but in a deep and silent way. I had survived family rejection, social ostracism, physical violence, exile, and poverty, and I was still standing, still believing, still moving forward. That meant something. I discovered I had a gift for connecting with people. Despite the language barrier, despite the cultural differences, I realized I could build relationships. People at church liked me. My co-workers liked me. There was something about me, perhaps the warmth of my Jordanian upbringing, perhaps the empathy that comes from suffering, perhaps a gift from God that drew people in. I discovered that I loved studying theology. What had begun as a desperate search for truth in a cramped room in Amman transformed into a true intellectual passion. I started taking online theology courses. I read voraciously Christian theologian, church history, apologetics, philosophy of religion. I was no longer just a believer. I was becoming a student of my faith, someone capable of articulating what I believed and why. And I discovered that God was faithful, not in a superficial way, like everything works out perfectly. Things didn't work out perfectly. They were confusing, painful, and complicated. But in every confusion, in every pain, in every complication, God was there, present, acting. He supported me through the church community. He supported me through unexpected friendship. He supported me through a part-time job that became a full-time job. He supported me during the asylum process, which was approved after 18 months. He supported me through the local language, which I learned faster than I expected. He supported me, and supported me until I could look back on the trajectory of my story and see a pattern, a common thread running through every dark chapter, every difficult transition, every moment of despair. That guiding thread was grace. Undeserved grace, unearned grace, unconditional grace. The grace of a God who doesn't give you what you deserve, but gives you what you need. The grace that found me in a library in Amman, called me in a dark room, sustained me during exile, and brought me to a place where I could breathe. About 3 years after arriving in Europe, I received a phone call that I had long since given up waiting for. It belonged to my mother. I didn't recognize the number. I answered cautiously, expecting it to be telemarketing or a mistake. Instead, I heard a voice I would recognize anywhere, even after 1,000 years of separation. Karim? My heart stopped. It really did stop. I stood there in my small apartment, with the phone pressed against my ear, and for several seconds I couldn't speak. Karim, Habibi, is that you? Mom? I finally managed to say. Mom? It's me. She started to cry. I started to cry. For a long time, neither of us could articulate words. We just cried together, across thousands of miles of telephone line, mother and son, separated by religion, geography, and time, united by a love that no difference in belief could destroy. When he finally spoke, he said, I missed you so much, Habibi. Every single day, every single day. I said, "I missed you too, Mom. You have no idea." She said, "Your father doesn't know I'm calling. He'd be angry, but I don't care. You're my son. You'll always be my son. Nothing changes that." I wanted to ask her so many things: how she was, how my father was, how Tariq, Omar, and Noor were, how the house was, what her kitchen smelled like, if she still made mansaf on Fridays, if the jasmine in the garden had bloomed, if the world I had left behind was the same one I remembered. She told me things slowly, through tears. My father was well, but older. He had retired from teaching. He never uttered my name anymore, but she had seen him once, sitting alone in my old room, holding the family photo I hadn't taken with me, the one that hung on the wall. She said he just sat there, holding the photo, without saying anything, and she believed, though she couldn't be sure, that he missed me, that somewhere beneath the anger, the shame, and the rigid adherence to what he believed was right, my father missed his son. Tariq had gotten married and had a son. Omar had finished university and was working as an accountant. Noor was studying literature at university and was doing well. My mother and I talked for almost an hour. It was the most precious hour of my life, more precious than the night of my conversion, more precious than my baptism, because in that hour, I heard my mother's voice and knew that love had not died. It had been buried under layers of religious obligation, cultural expectation, and fear, but it had not died. It was still there, pulsing like a heart under the rubble. Before hanging up, my mother said something that left me speechless. She said, "Karim, I don't understand what you believe in. I don't agree with it. I pray every day that Allah will guide you back to Islam, but I want you to know, I see that you are at peace. In your voice, in the way you speak, there is a peace that didn't exist before. And whatever gave you that peace, I can't completely hate it." She paused, then she said, "Your father's God demands that I reject him, but my heart refuses. And perhaps the heart knows something that religion doesn't." She hung up before I could answer. I was in my apartment, phone in hand, trembling. My mother, a devout Muslim who had worn the hijab her entire adult life, who prayed 5 times a day, who fasted every Ramadan, who believed in the Quran with every fiber of her being, she had just admitted that the heart might know something that religion doesn't. That was, in its own discreet way, the most revolutionary thing anyone in my family had ever said. I want to be honest with you about the current situation, because I don't want to give you a fairy tale ending that doesn't exist. My father hasn't spoken to me since the day he sent me away. It's been almost 6 years. I've sent letters, emails, and messages through family members. He hasn't responded to any of them. I don't know if he reads them. I hope so. I prefer to believe he does. My mother and I talk on the phone every 2 or 3 weeks. It's always in secret. She calls when my father isn't home. We talk about daily life, about food, about the weather, about everything except religion. We have an unspoken agreement. She doesn't try to convert me, and I don't try to convert her. We simply love each other, despite the distance and the differences. Tariq hasn't contacted me since that threatening message years ago. I pray for him regularly. I pray that one day he will understand that my conversion wasn't a betrayal of the family, but a response to something greater than family. I don't expect him to agree. I just hope he stops hating me. Omar, my younger brother, the funny one, surprised me. About a year ago, he got in touch. He sent me a message saying, "I don't care about this religion thing. You're my brother, and I want to talk to you." Since then, we've been talking. He tells me jokes. He sends me pictures. He doesn't talk about faith, and neither do I. But the connection is there, and it's comforting. Noor is the one who gives me the most hope. She's 20 now. She's studying at university, and she's asking questions. Important questions. The same kind of questions I started asking when I was 19. She hasn't made any declarations. She hasn't converted. But she's searching, and I believe God is in that search, just as He was in mine. As for me, I am 27 years old. I live in a European city. I have a good job. I belong to a church that I love. I have friends who are like family. I study theology part-time and dream of one day becoming a pastor or counselor, helping other converts navigate the difficult path from Islam to Christianity. I have a small apartment, not much bigger than the one in West Amman, but it's mine, and it's my home. On my desk, I have two things: my Bible, the same one George gave me, now worn, with folded pages and underlined on almost every page, and that family photo, the one I took from my desk the day I was evicted. My father, my mother, Tariq, Omar, Noor, and me, all of us together, smiling, in front of our house in East Amman. I look at that picture every day, and every day I pray for each person in it. I pray that my father's heart softens. I pray that my mother's secret courage grows. I pray that Tariq's anger dissipates. I pray that Omar's kindness deepens. I pray that Noor's questions lead her to the truth. And I pray for myself, that I may have the strength to continue, that I may not become bitter, that I may not let the pain of what I have lost overshadow the joy of what I have found, that I may be faithful to the one who was faithful to me when I had nothing to offer. If you followed me this far, I want to tell you something directly. I don't hate Islam. I don't hate Muslims. My father is Muslim. My mother is Muslim. My brothers are Muslim. They are good people. They are people I love with all my heart. Islam is not my enemy. Islam is the home I grew up in. I left that home, but I don't want to destroy it. What I mean is this: I found something. I found someone. I found Jesus, and he changed everything. He didn't just change my religion. He changed my heart. He changed how I see God, how I see other people, how I see myself. He took a scared and confused young man, drowning in doubts and questions, and gave him answers. Not all the answers. I still have many questions. But the most important answer is, you are loved. This is the essence of the gospel, the message of Christianity that I want to share with everyone who is willing to listen. You are loved, not because you are good enough, not because you pray enough, not because you fast enough, not because you follow enough rules. You are loved because God is love, and His love is not conditional on your performance. It is free, it is available, it is for you right now, exactly as you are. I know it sounds too simple. I know it sounds too good to be true. I thought so too once, but I lived it. I experienced it. I felt the reality of it in the darkest moments of my life, when I was bleeding on the sidewalk, when I was crying on a mattress, when I was in an airport saying goodbye to everything I knew. In each of those moments, God was there, not distant, not judging, not waiting for me to pull myself together, simply there, loving me, embracing me, whispering, "Follow me." See, if you are a Muslim and you are watching this, I want you to know that I respect your faith and your journey. I am not here to mock, attack, or belittle you. I am here to tell my story and let you decide what to do with it. But if a part of you is asking questions, the same kind of questions I started asking in that university library, I want you to know that it's okay to ask them. It's okay to be curious. It's okay to pick up a Bible and read it for yourself. It's okay to question what you've been taught. Questioning doesn't mean weakness. It means honesty. And God honors honesty. If you are a Christian and are watching this, I want you to know that your brothers and sisters in the Muslim world need your prayers. They need your support. Many of them are living double lives right now, just as I once did. Many are scared, lonely, confused. Many have lost everything or are about to lose everything. Please pray for them. Please support organizations that help persecuted converts. And please, if you meet someone of Muslim background, be like George. Be kind. Be patient. Be honest. Don't preach to them. Don't try to win arguments. Simply live your faith authentically and let the Holy Spirit do the rest. And if you are someone who doesn't believe in any religion, atheist, agnostic, skeptic, I want you to know that I respect that too. I myself was once a skeptic. I understand the power of questions and the importance of evidence and reason. All I ask is that you don't dismiss my experience simply because it doesn't fit your worldview. Something happened to me, something real, something that transformed my life from the inside out. You can call it whatever you want: a psychological shift, a cultural adaptation, a subjective experience, but I call it grace. And I've never been the same since. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know if I'll ever see my father again. I don't know if Tariq will ever forgive me. I don't know if Noor will continue her search and where it will lead her. I don't know if I'll ever return to Jordan. I don't know if I'll get married, have children, build my own family. I don't know if I'll become a pastor, a counselor, or something completely different. But I know one thing. I know who holds the future, and I trust in him. Not because he has made my life easier. He hasn't. Not because he has given me everything I wanted. He hasn't. But because he gave me himself. And that, I've learned, is enough. There's a verse in the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28, that says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." All things. Not just the good thing, not just the happy thing. All things. The pain, the rejection, the beating, the exile, the loneliness, the homesickness, all of that. God takes all of that and transforms it into something good. Not immediately, not always visibly, but eventually, faithfully, surely. I saw this play out in my own story. The pain of losing my family led me to find a new family in the church. The loneliness of exile led me to develop a deeper relationship with God. The beatings I endured made me understand forgiveness in a way I never could have otherwise. The double life I led taught me the value of truth. Every dark chapter, when I look back now, was a necessary one. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't painless, but it was necessary. Like the blows of a chisel that transform a rough stone into a sculpture. They hurt, but they were shaping me into someone I could never have become without them. I'm still shaping myself. I'm still a work in progress. I have bad days. I have days when the loneliness is unbearable, when I miss my mother so much I can't breathe, when I wonder what my life would have been like if I had never opened that Bible in the library. I have days when my faith seems weak and distant, and I need to consciously choose to believe, even when I don't feel it. But even in these days, even in these moments, there is something in my core that remains firm. A small, unwavering conviction that burns like a constant flame, no matter how strong the wind blows. The conviction that I am known, I am loved, I am welcome, and everything will be all right. Not because life will be easy, but because the one who walks with me through life is good, and his goodness is eternal. It doesn't depend on my circumstances. It doesn't depend on my feelings. It doesn't depend on absolutely anything except his own nature. He is good. He has always been good. He will always be good, and he is mine, and I am his. This is my story. This is me. Karim Haddad, 27 years old, born in Amman, Jordan, raised Muslim, follower of Jesus. Thank you for listening. I know it was long. I know I took up a lot of your time, but I hope it was worth it. I hope that somewhere in this story, you found something that touched you, something that made you think, something that made you feel, something that reminded you that the most important journeys in life are not the ones we plan. They are the ones that find us. If this story moved you, I have one last request. Leave a comment below. Tell me which part of the story touched you the most. I read all the comments and reply to as many as I can. Your words mean a lot to me. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of real people who found faith in the most unexpected places, who lost everything and found something even greater, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. There are many more stories to tell. Stories of courage, sacrifice, transformation, and hope. Stories the world needs to hear. Until next time, my friends, may God bless you. And remember, no matter where you are, no matter what you have done, no matter what you believe or don't believe, you are loved. You are deeply, intensely, eternally loved, and nothing can change that. My name is Karim, and this is my testimony.